Did you know that there are 75 million different products sold on Amazon? It's astounding. And that's just one store. This world is now a place of limitless pleasure and temptation. I will just confess a few of my own. Usually the place that I go to solve life's problems is the refrigerator. But my greatest temptation of all is probably this. Now, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups may not be your thing, but that to me is the greatest food ever created in the history of the world. And I could eat them all day and they would make me very happy. But I think there's something that's very powerful in the Torah's messaging, which is born out of this week's Parsha, as well as many others. It's really a central idea. And it is the sins against the land. The Torah in this week's Parsha utters a curse, essentially. It is a consequence for those who sin against the land. Now, the sin against the land is really something that goes deep, deep back in the Torah. The first sin against the land was the sin of Cain and Abel, right? Cain slays his brother, the blood of Hevel drips into the ground, and that is the first sin against the land. And the punishment for the sin against the land is exile. If you have violated the land, you can't stay in the land. And so Cain has to wander because the land will no longer tolerate him. If you look through the Torah, especially when you get to the books of Isaiah, Yirmiyahu, certainly the book of Devarim, the idea of idol worship is a sin against the land. Using the trees and the rocks, the mountains, the various natural features of the land as part of your connection to the divine, as a divine entity in and of itself. That is a sin against the land, and that too will bring about exile. But the odd thing is this week's Parsha, the sin against the land is the failure to observe the Sabbatical year, the Shemitah. Now that's sort of an odd thing. I understand idol worship. That's really a sin against God himself. And I understand murder, that the land cannot stand to absorb the blood of the murderers. Those things make sense. But what about Shemitah? What is it about the Sabbatical year, leaving the fields fallow, that is so, so important? And perhaps one perspective on this is that the Torah wants you to know that there is going to be a point in life where it's not about consumption. There's a point where it's not about what you can get and what you can eat and what you can craft and what you can make and what you can push into the GDP. There has to be a space in your life, not just a Shabbat, not just once a week, but there has to be an actual time, a stretch of time where it's not really about advancing the economic goals. It's not about collecting stuff. It's not about pushing the pleasure principle. It is beyond the hedon. And so if you can't do that, if you can't exercise some level of restraint, if you can't say, I will live without, then you can't be in the land. The land of Israel is meant to be a place where you can transcend, at least for a time, that lifelong pursuit of acquisition, that lifelong pursuit of satisfying the dopamine receptors, the hedons of the world. And so it is this fundamental teaching of Judaism that things are actually better when you can say, I can live without it. I think there is no more important lesson that for our generation, the generation of Amazon and eBay and iShares, this generation needs to learn how to not only live with wealth, but also to live without it.